I'm trying to find out what we might be doing if you've got the responsibility to do training and that's suicide prevention, which is laudable, but at the same time, does that create a cause of action if something goes wrong? I was told yesterday, I believe by the senator from York, that only if there's a gross action or something like that. So apparently it does allow for a cause of action if there's some gross element to this. And what I understand this amendment does is creates a private cause of action. Is that what are we doing?
Either one would be a private cause of action. If you're asking if the gross is a more difficult standard, I guess it could be. I don't know how they are defining gross. But the thing is, I think that section we impose a responsibility for training. We're holding them out to a higher standard. And if there is something that they should do that they should not do, then then they should have some responsibility. And that's why I deleted the section.
Is that in the training part, or is that in the action of the teacher that is supposed to spot something that he or she received?
I think it goes into the foreseeability test that you would end up studying early on in law school. I
might not have done that well in law school.
Well, I think that you have to have the nexus as to whether or not it's foreseeable that cause of action will have a nexus as to the training and something that they did or should have done.
Mr. President, I want to be heard on the amendment. And
Senator from Greenville.
Quick thing about it, y'all better really look at this and just let's not. This is a laudable thing we're doing, but we're opening up teachers. It looks to me like lawsuits. If there's a suicide in the class, they've been trained. Why didn't they spot this action or that action? And suddenly a teacher is on the hook for having failed to do something the teacher should have learned. Y'all, let's really think about this a minute. Let's just, we see suicide, yeah, we can do something, and that sounds good. But we'd better put our thinking caps on here since we're in a school setting and really consider what you might be opening the teacher up to by way of responsibility. Here's what I'd like to see. You have the teacher trained, and the teacher's completely exempt from any lawsuit whatsoever under any circumstances. There should be only good feelings about a teacher suddenly doesn't see some act that supposedly some lawyer can make an argument that that's gross negligence, and now the teacher's being sued, the school district's being sued. Is the principal responsible? How about the ones that trained the teacher because they didn't adequately train? Do we have now so I'm going to ask that we carry this over, and I'd ask the chairman of the Judiciary Committee to really, did it come judiciary or did it come education? Well, maybe it needs a Judiciary Committee. I don't want to hold it up. I think this could save lives, but at the same time, we don't want to create a scenario that we end up a whole can of litigation kind of stuff, and I don't think the author intends that. We want the teachers on our side. We don't want them scared to death of everything that happens. And
Senator from Sumter, what purpose do you rise?
Senator, yield for a question. Senator, I don't want to get passionate about this, but have you or any family member, don't answer the question, you ever lost a family member to suicide?
Yes, sir, is the answer. I have.
I have.
Yes, sir.
I understand your concerns. I'm willing to address them however we can, but the bottom line is that suicide among youth is a tragic, sometime avoidable circumstance, and we have to find an answer. I appreciate the fact that you're trying to do that, but we cannot allow the fragility of the law, the frailties of the law, to prevent us from training our teachers who spend as much time with our children as we do.
Right.
For looking at some elements. We know that sometimes people snap, people break, and there's no way to know it. But we also know that there's other times where a trained eye
Kid spot it.
can spot it and at least inform parents.
Yeah, you are so right.
Please work something out. I will join you in whatever you work out. but please work something
I agree. I would ask, I'm not asking it to be referred or anything. I'm asking it to be carried over, and I'm seeing
Senator
nods.
from Pickens, for what purpose do you rise?
From Greenville.
Yes, sir.
Senator,
Yes, sir.
Listen to what the senator from Sumter just asked you, sort of concerns me. Did you know that the concern that you're raising has to do with the amendment, which would delete the section that keeps the lawsuits from occurring? And if the amendment were to pass, it pretty much would open up the schools and and specifically the teachers.
But wait a minute, Justice. I asked the question yesterday from the
Right.
floor, and actually my concerns were confirmed, because if you can prove gross,
Right.
then even without the amendment, that appeared to be a hole in it. And why is there any liability? Why are we not just?
There ought not be any
It should be
liability.
nothing.
No.
Even if somebody missed an obvious point, that teacher still should not be
Well,
opened up to lawsuit.
You know, I've watched all these things on television about the various teenagers that have taken their lives in response to some sort of hazing or
Right.
abuse or whatever. And I'll tell you, I had an experience with a suicide of a family member years and years ago. Mm-hmm. I was one of the last people to see that person alive. It was a
Right.
grandparent.
Right.
And I was a teenager, and it bothered me for the longest of times, and I had to deal with it spiritually for many years thereafter. But I didn't see a thing. I didn't spot a thing in that person that would have led me to believe they were about to take their own life.
Yeah.
And for us as a society to start holding people responsible for other people's actions, many times this is hidden. You don't see it. You don't recognize it. And to suggest that we're going to hold teachers responsible or administrators responsible.
It's holding them
legally,
to a psychologist
yeah,
level
you can't
or a
read-
psychiatrist
you can't
level
read people's
standard.
minds, and some people do things so impetuously they don't think of that. Suicide, and we don't talk about this a lot, but suicide is one of the more prevalent ways that people are dying today. People of all ages, and it's been that way. It's something we didn't used to talk about. But I can tell you that this notion that, well, we're going to take language out of the bill that's going to in some way allow lawsuits to be filed or make litigation more likely if something isn't done, you're exactly right. We don't need to be looking, what the Senator from Sumter is talking about is what we ought to be about, and what you're talking about, providing help as best we can. That's what this bill does. But this notion that we're going to set up the local schools in some way to be legally responsible for somebody, you can't read their mind.
You can't. And here, let me give you this as a strange curveball. Suppose this happened. Suppose one of the markers was a child is sullen and does not communicate much. Well, now a teacher, because they want to protect themselves, watch this now, because they want to protect themselves, afraid of lawsuit, he starts marking down the sullen ones, because I don't want to get sued. If something happens to that 15-year-old child, this is a case. This is a case up in North Carolina I'm familiar with. No indication except non-communication over a period of about a year. But now suppose after the suicide, all right, so the teacher now wants to make sure this doesn't happen, and the teacher starts now marking children that fit in a category just to protect the teacher. Now the principal, this is turned into who?
Exactly.
It's turned into the principal. Now the principal's supposed to call them into the office and say, are you okay? And then the principal's now calling the district office because the principal's got a list of 32 children in that school, in that middle school, that could fit the category. Do you see how this kind of cascades?
Did you know that as I sat there as a member of the Education Committee, and I never voiced this to any of my colleagues, but I was in the committee room, and it occurred to me, we're making schools and teachers responsible for about everything.
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 Last time I checked, we ought to be encouraging them. Of course,
Yeah.
most of the teachers I've got in this 30-something member Sunday school class I'm in, most of them are either they or their spouse or somebody in their immediate family is a teacher, and including my wife. But they've got their hands full teaching what the law requires them to do and what we all want them to do, getting their kids. They don't have time. They're going to be asked to go on an in-service day.
And in 3 hours become an expert.
Become an expert, and if they don't do what the law spells out in some way, they're going to be sued over it.
This is very dangerous. In fact, let me tell you what this could do, is stigmatize a young person because of something somebody said, and a non-professional is afraid of being sued, marks them down. Now that young person has to go into some kind of special training or something, and instead of it helping them, do you know what? You can induce behavior sometimes by the talking about it.
Exactly.
Now, I'm not saying don't treat, don't fine, but this is the kind of thing that's well intended, but could create more problems. I want teachers to be trained to spot the obvious thing.
Exactly.
And be held harmless if.
Well,
there should be no lawsuit possibility here.
Exactly. If anything, there ought to be a ban on it. But would you join me in let's carrying this bill over?
Move to carry over, Mr. President.
We'll get an amendment drawn that just bans a lawsuit.
Mr. President.
Motion is to carry over. Senator from Darlington is asking.
You'd like to be heard, yeah.
Senator from Darlington.